everybody. I'm Caryn Hartglass. You're listening to It's All About Food. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to bring on my guest who I've wanted to talk to for a very long time, and now it's finally happening. So I'm excited about that, and I hope you are too. John Sanbonmatsu. Did I pronounce that right?
You pronounced that unusually well. That's beautiful.
Thank you. John Sanbonmatsu is a writer, philosopher, and magician. He is author of The Omnivore's Deception: What We Get Wrong About Meat, Animals, and Ourselves, and of The Postmodern Prince: Critical Theory, Left Strategy, and the Making of a New Political Subject. John received his BA from Hampshire College and his PhD in the History of Consciousness Department at the University of California at Santa Cruz. John is professor of philosophy at Worcester Polytechnic Institute of Massachusetts, where he teaches ethics, politics, philosophy of film, and existentialism, among other courses. John lives in the Boston area, where he performs as a semi-professional magician and mentalist. Welcome to It's All About Food. You sound like a very interesting person, John.
Thank you very much. It's all branding. I trust you. Trust me.
All right.
I'm not as interesting, I'm sure, as that makes me sound. But thank you very much, Karen.
Okay. Well, there's so many things in your bio that I want to talk about, but we only have less than an hour. And I've already told you I want to bring you back on later to talk about your new book, The Omnivore's Deception, which comes out in June.
Yes, June 17th.
Okay. So we will get back to that later. I'm sure there are things we'll talk about today that you probably touch on in the book. But first, I wanted to say, I think the first time I became aware of you and your work, I think I was late to the party, but I saw an interview on YouTube, which was the United Poultry Concern's 8th Annual Conscious Eating Conference. What are the most compassionate choices? And you were on a panel, and the question was, cell-based meat is good for animals. And for the motion was Bruce Friedrich, Good Food Institute, and Leah Garces, Mercy for Animals. And then against the motion, bravely, were you and Vasil Stanescu. It was a great panel. It was clear to me you guys were the winners. I was
Thank you.
totally on your side.
Thank you.
And then I love the website, The Clean Meat Hosts. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that. And then you recently sent me an article in The Atlantic, which I just read, that had to do with the decline of plant-based eating. So can we start with this whole concept of clean meat, meat eating, and creating plant-based meats, and where's it going, and what you think about it?
Yeah, thanks for raising the question. It's very vexing to me. I mean, you have people like Bruce Friedrich who were part of the animal advocacy movement, and who are well-meaning, I think, overall, who have felt frustrated at the slow progress or even zero progress, dare I almost say, of the animal rights movement and animal advocacy to make, headway against this system of violence, against other beings. And so there's this a desire for a kind of Hail Mary pass. Okay, well, the public is so addicted to the animal economy and the meat economy that and so lacking in compassion fundamentally for chickens, pigs, cows, and other creatures that we
I want to get back to that comment, and not to get you off the subject, but
yeah.
humans lacking in compassion. Yeah.
Yes, I mean,
I don't want to, I'm sorry, I distracted you. I should
oh
have
no,
made
no,
a
no,
note
no,
of it.
not at
Yes.
all. No, but I mean, I think this is right. We're all born with a certain capacity for empathy. That capacity can be either cultivated, or encouraged in us or not. And most people, almost everybody, does have compassion for animals, but only select species under certain circumstances. And so in general, we most people are okay with the fact that we're killing trillions of animals every year, including marine animals. That puts the number into the trillions, and that's all normalized and seen as actually the best way to live a human life, right? So I can come back to that, but the idea of cellular meat or cultivated meat or what has been called quote clean meat, yeah, is the idea that we can coax the public in away from animal foods by simply creating meat in the lab or in a kind of biosecure vat. Now, there are so many problems with this technology. There are some people who think it's unethical to say take some cells from an animal and biopsy or something and then create the meat. That is not my concern at all. If this thing was going to work, then that would be a small price to pay for ending the system. But it's not intended to end the system. I mean, the people who are backing this, and we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars I think, being invested in this technology, they understand full well that the meat industry, the animal industry is because there's not enough earth left to meet future demand for animal flesh, right? That they're looking to create a quote diverse protein portfolio. So there's already problems with that because it's this idea that, well, we have to that there's a protein shortfall, and there just isn't. I mean, there are plenty of ways for humans to get proper nutrition, as you know, and the listeners to your show know. There've been vegetarians and vegans for centuries and centuries. You don't need a high tech solution to it's a kind of it's a false solution to a problem that doesn't exist,
Mhm.
which is, oh, there's just not enough good foods to eat if you stop eating animals. The thing is, it's also kind of contradictory because if you're going to market this stuff as they do market it, mostly as a health benefit and an environmental benefit, while downplaying the ethical advantages of stopping meat consumption, then you're not going to win in the long run because the public doesn't take seriously the idea that there's something wrong, right, with what we do to other animals in the meat economy. And so if you're going to undermine your own project by talking about what's in it for the consumer rather than what's in it for the animals. In other words, it's better for your health, it's fewer climate emissions, and so on, which is true to some extent. Um, then you're never going to get the public to stop eating animal flesh also, like the regular conventionally grown or raised stuff. And the meat industry knows this. So there's some investment by the meat industry in this new technology at the same time that they're expanding factory farming. So it's
Mhm.
not an either or thing. It's a both and, right? They want insect protein, quote unquote. It's just horrific. Because we know so much about the cognition now of invertebrates, and we know we shouldn't be treating insects as disposable commodities. But there are already plans to raise quadrillions of insects for
Yep.
food, as you know, uh, and industrialized animal agriculture is increasing. Per capita meat consumption is increasing. Americans are eating more meat and this is a key point, right? In spite of the fact that there have never been more widely available vegan alternatives than there are today, in terms of like the plant-based meat products, Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger, and etc. So it's clear we can have the normalization of veganism to some extent as a quote choice, a consumer choice, or a special diet. Capitalism is fine with that. Okay. I mean, capitalism has been providing consumers with gluten-free products and,
Sure.
low sodium and low sugar products. It's fine with that. So capitalism will continue to expand these markets. Um, so you have people going to vegan restaurants who are meat eaters. They love vegan cuisine, and then they're going to go to McDonald's the next day. So
Yeah.
I'm
Sadly,
sorry to
sadly, in
go
New
on and
York
on.
City, some of our best vegan restaurants, in my opinion, are going out of business now.
Yes, yes, that is
The
also,
ones that serve real food.
yeah, yes. So I think the the high-tech solution to the problem misnames the problem. The problem isn't lack of alternatives. The problem is not lack of delicious things to eat, right? The problem is human mass violence against other beings and an ideology of supremacy and an economy that encourages and incentivizes, monetizes this domination, right, and keeps us on this path.
Okay, so you have said that you think that humans have this capacity for compassion, that it's in all of us. And more, I see humans' capacity for violence in like every sector. I was just reading about what did they call them? These pedophile hunters?
Oh yeah, yeah, I saw that.
These people that feel like they can be vigilantes and lure and harm people that are possibly pedophiles. And the article went into that some of their targets really aren't doing anything illegal or necessarily bad. But what is it about this attraction to violence that we have? It is really so embedded in us. And we seek it in entertainment, and more, we're seeking it in our own lives. Okay, so that's sad. I like to say, when talking about these alternative meats, that as long as we think we need to have meat on the plate in any form, whether it's animal-based or meat or plant-based, we're not going to solve the problem. We don't need any sort of meaty anything. People need to learn about what the ideal foods are for humans and learn that they're delicious when they're prepared appropriately or simply. And we're not really doing that.
Yeah, I guess I would just point out that it's part of the Orwellian project of the modern meat economy, right? That we forget that the word meat itself, for about 1,000 years of English usage, simply referred to any substantial food product. So, or for food substance. So even into the early 20th century, you could find references to nut meats and so forth. So when I hear people
Mm.
talking about fake meat products, for example, right, it always bothers me because plant-based meats were, I mean, you could order whatever, go to a tavern in England in the 16th century and be provided with drink and meat, and the meat didn't mean animal flesh necessarily. It could have been, toast or something. Uh, it simply means meat. The word meat simply meant a substantial something to eat. And we all want that. We all crave that. I mean, as a vegetarian and then a vegan, it always bothered me when I'd be invited to a wedding reception or something, and they would give me a salad. It's not enough.
Yep.
I want something, meaty meaning simply substantial. And so it's that, but it's the association that we now have, right? A one-to-one correspondence with the word meat, an animal, the body of a dead animal. That's the problem. And I wouldn't have any problem against or any objection to us eating dead animals or dead humans, for that matter, if there wasn't the problem of how they get dead, which is that you have to commit an act of extreme violence to
So
kill someone.
roadkill is okay.
No, because roadkill is a no. That's a PETA actually has kind of joked about roadkill, but no, what we call roadkill is merely an artifact of our structural violence
Mm,
against animals in nature, right? We build highways through
yeah.
their homes, their habitats,
Yeah.
so they shouldn't be. We should respect their bodies as well. But at any rate, yeah, I mean as you know, Karen, there's a propaganda system to keep everybody thinking that, oh, well, you need your protein, and the only way to get protein is to have dead animal on your plate, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sadly, I'm still being asked that question on a regular basis. It just blows my mind. Yeah.
This is the way ideology works. It's really interesting, right? Because I've been teaching about this stuff and giving lectures to a variety of audiences for many years, and it doesn't matter who the audience is or what their education level is. It doesn't matter whether I'm talking to little kids or college students or professors at distinguished universities. It's like everybody went to the same dumb school, and at this dumb school, they've been taught that to ask the same stupid questions, red herring, and give the same red herring arguments. Well, what about carrots? Carrots are alive. Well, native peoples used to pray to the animal before they killed them. Uh, hunting is natural. What about the animals who kill other animals? I mean, all of
All
these.
the arguments. Yep.
Yes, but it's what's so bizarre, right? Is that what I'm calling, dumb or stupid school is people don't literally go to that. They absorb these things through us as weird osmosis in the culture. And that's because the animal system is the fundamental basis of human existence, human identity, human economy, the organization of our productive forces in nature. And so we just absorb it as ideology. And that's so, as you say, you hear these same things. It just gets aggravating, exasperating to hear it over and over and over again. These asinine. Oh, well, for example, I'm sure you get this a lot. Well, if we were to grow vegetables, where would we find the land to grow all the plants,
Yeah.
right? When, as you and your listeners,
Dumb, just dumb.
just dumb. Um,
Okay, so I want to ask you,
yeah.
um, I'm wondering what one studies uh, the history of consciousness. And then I want to go to ethics and philosophy for those who study those things. How do we or do we not come to an objective point of view?
Okay, so as you noted, I took a PhD in a program called the History of
Of
Consciousness.
course, it was in Santa
Right,
Cruz.
right. So, we would just go out into under the redwoods and we would beat drums a
Yeah.
lot, and then we'd hold we'd hold hands and um yeah, it's a longer conversation perhaps, but it's a strange it was a strange, well, it was a unique program, the History of Consciousness, and it by the time I got there, it had really changed from its original iteration. But the idea was it was an inter and is an interdisciplinary humanities program, and I think initially the idea of the history of consciousness simply meant kind of the history of ideas, the history of political theory and philosophy and culture. Uh, so it wasn't like a psychology program, history of
Okay.
consciousness. Okay. And so when I was there, I studied philosophy, political theory, sociology, critical social theory. Um, what was the other question? I can't remember.
Okay.
Oh,
So
yeah,
then we have ethics and philosophy. And
right.
I haven't studied these things. I consider myself an ethical person, but is there a way, or are you taught to be objective and take the subjectivity of your opinions out of the conversation somehow? It's not even possible, I don't think.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, so the branch of philosophy that deals with how we know things and whether we can know things and whether there's truth, whether there's objective truth, is what we call epistemology. you know. Uh,
Oh,
and yes, so epistemologists have been thinking about this question for thousands of years. And what I would say is this, that there are branches of what are called modern analytic philosophy. Analytic philosophy is associated with the US and the UK mostly, in
mm.
the early 20th century to the present. And there are philosophers who think that we can be more or less objective, I think. I don't agree with that, and I think most philosophers don't necessarily agree with that either, because as you say, right, we're always situated in a place and in a body and in a culture and like there. But that said, there one can certainly be more or less honest in the way one approaches an intellectual problem, more or less informed in the way that one approaches a problem, and to be alert or not to one's own bad assumptions, prejudices. So to do good philosophy, it doesn't mean that you have to take yourself out of the picture
Mm.
necessarily, right? But you have to be intellectually honest and self-honest, right? I don't pretend in my own classes, it's a choice I make. I don't pretend to be without a politics or without an ethical background. I do try to, expose my students to different points of view. I don't try to indoctrinate them. But for example, I'm teaching a course this term on capitalism, and I'm very much a socialist. Now, you might say, well, how can you have a professor who's a socialist teaching about capitalism? Well, the fact is that in the other, 500 courses taught at my university or whatever it is, everybody else is pro-capitalist. They just don't say
Right.
so, right? I
That's
mean, they're
right.
teaching courses that is take for granted this structure we have, and in subtle ways are reinforcing it. And I'm asking my students, well, wait a minute, let's step outside the system for a minute and try to understand it in a critical way. And then what they do with that is up to them. But so yeah, you've asked a question that, for example, feminist epistemologists have been working on for decades now, and the consensus among feminists is that no, it's okay that we can't be objective. Well, but because for example, if you want to create a just society, if you want to stop animals from suffering or women from being disadvantaged in our society, that takes a certain commitment, a personal commitment. Uh, and so, as ethicists, I feel we need to acknowledge feeling and empathy and to honor those as parts of the way that we know the world, if that makes sense.
Mm.
There are certain ways how can I perceive a moral phenomenon if I don't feel anything about it? Now, we're not talking about my book today, as you point out, but I will say I have a chapter on empathy and sociopathy and psychopathy in my book. And if you look at sociopaths and psychopaths, they're able to perceive the suffering of others, but they don't feel anything about it, you
Mm.
know, at best. Maybe they even feel aroused by it. But um, so if I show videos to my students of animals being harmed in the food industry, the reason I do that is not just to give them an intellectual, objective understanding of what is done. That's part of it, but I also want them to feel
Hmm.
what's happening because that reveals to them the depth of the evil.
Yeah. Feeling.
Feel.
Feeling. Whoa, 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 feelings.
That's right.
Uh, I only understand what's in my head. I always say this, but I don't understand how people that study ethics don't come to the same conclusions that I do.
Well, that's a question, right? I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with the Tower of Babel
Oh, yeah, right.
in Genesis, right, in the Bible, Old Testament.
I learned that in Hebrew school where I first experienced prejudice and discrimination
I'm very sorry to hear that.
against
Um,
me.
yes. Well, it's a simple story about how humans decide to build a tower that would reach the heavens. And it's a kind of allegory about, our desire to know everything and to feel a sense of power. And God sees this and it's like, no way. That's like you're having pretensions to godliness. And so God destroys the tower and scatters humans to all four corners of the earth and gives them different languages so they can't be unified anymore, right? And I talk about this in my classes because I see it, it's a kind of fable about the human condition. The fact is that even within a marriage, a couple often can't, the other, one person thinks, oh my God, why would he do that? Or, it's so hard to understand one another. And there's so
Mm,
many ways to feel misunderstandings about basic things in life. You know what I mean? So the idea that humans are all going to get on the same page and have the exact same ethical view that's the challenge, and I don't think it's possible, but at the same time, I think we can get closer and closer to it. It's like an asymptotic curve, where or asymptotic curve, I mean, where you come closer and closer to the x-axis, but never really arrive. Um, but it's frustrating and horrifying that, as you pointed out, humans remain incredibly violent,
Mm,
and humans have always been violent. But
yeah.
that doesn't mean we have to accept that.
I
You,
don't want to accept it. But I walk out of my apartment in New York City every day. And it's like anyone in a car is evil to the pedestrians. There's just constant rage going on here.
Yes, but that's because we live in a form of economic and social life, right, that creates these structures, these technological
Yeah.
structures that are inimical to life. I mean, the automobile, as you know, has killed billions and billions of animals around the world in roadways. It's killed and maimed millions of humans. And just being encased in this metal death trap, death machine, where just one second, one split second's lapse of attention can lead to your death or the death of other people. That is such an irrational technology because nobody can drive in any given moment in any life. None of us can maintain a perfect record of attention or focus.
Hmm.
That's just because we're animals like other animals, and we look around, and so we all that is to say that we set ourselves up for failure as a species when we accept these structures.
I'm just curious. I don't know everything about you clearly, and I only read your bio, so I don't get a lot of the details. I'm wondering, did you have a pivotal point where you came to these conclusions about animals and exploitation and veganism?
I did. I had my conversion story, I suppose. I
Yeah.
mean, I grew up with cats and dogs, and so I had always understood at least that some animals, had complexity and were worth getting to know, And I grew up at a time before cell phones, right, when we kids were out exploring the world and
Oh, yeah.
having adventures, and so that sense of a wider world and the other wonderful creatures in it was really part of my upbringing. But then in college, I took a philosophy course and we read an essay by Peter Singer, the utilitarian philosopher.
Mm.
It was a very famous essay he wrote called Famine, Affluence, and Morality. And I tried to refute his argument, which was that the reader in the global north who was looking at his work had a moral responsibility to donate 90% of their income to people starving at the time in Bangladesh. And it was a big crisis for me as an undergraduate because I thought, oh no, he's right. And it was sometime after that that I was in the bookstore and I came across his book, Peter Singer's book, Animal Liberation. Now, in my own new book, I criticize Singer, and I think that we're at a point where, um, in spite of all the wonderful work Peter has done, it's time to move on from his frameworks. But
Hmm.
But it was reading that book that made me confront an unease that I had always experienced about eating animals. Like I think many people have a kind of cognitive dissonance around this,
Sure.
which is why they feel so, as you know, so threatened about veganism. Um, so it was an opportunity to examine myself, and then I became a vegetarian, and then a few years later, a vegan. So I've been a vegan for over 30 years now, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm on 36, going to
Oh
37 in
my
August.
goodness. Wow. You beat me. I hate that.
Okay, there are people that are ahead of me. And don't we regret that we did it sooner?
Yeah.
But we did it when we did it, and it is what it is. This is an out there kind of question. I'm wondering, kind of with all the science fiction stuff that I see on television and in the series and movies, sometimes I wonder, in order for some of us to be comfortable, do we have to exploit others? Do we have to exploit people and animals? Is this utopian concept where we're all nice and take care of everything. Is that possible? I wonder if the
Yeah.
lifestyle that I have is because of exploitation.
I don't think that we have to exploit others to live a full and satisfying, productive life. I mean, if you look at, indigenous communities in the United States who survived here for thousands of years, they had
Mm.
tribal cultures that weren't perfect. I mean, I don't want to romanticize any form of human culture, which always has its problems and contradictions. But people within a tribal community all had social roles to play, but they wasn't exploitative. It wasn't like someone had an overseer who was timing them or telling them how to do stuff and was sitting there living off the fruits of their labor. So, which isn't to say that there hasn't been exploitation throughout human history, because there has been. But um, if you look at the way, for example, people respond in natural disasters, there's just, you see solidarity, you see
Mm.
mutual
Yeah.
aid, you see people looking out for their neighbors. So we're complex beings and we have good and bad aspects, but we know just through psychology and sociology and other disciplines, we know that the human personality is shaped, formed by all sorts of things, by economic structure, by family structure, by patriarchy, the fact that remain social subordinates to men in our society. All of these things go into the soup.
Hmm.
And so you're right that if, you look around my place or your place, and of course everything was extracted from somewhere. Some forest was chopped down for our books and so on and so forth. But the problem is under this economic system, we don't organize production around meeting needs, minimizing harm. None of that matters. Like literally, the only principle under capitalist development, literally the only principle is profit. That's if you look at like the charter of a corporation, it doesn't say
Hmm.
anything in there about, creating a livable world for the next 7 generations or something.
Yep.
It's you have the CEO has a fiduciary responsibility and a legal one to enrich the shareholders. That's it. Now, if in doing that, there's the collateral damage of doing good, that's fine. Like if you're producing something like an MRI machine, okay, like that helps people, but that isn't why the company exists. The company exists in order to make the profit. So what we need is a new form of economic development where that's not based on exploitation of poor, vulnerable humans, right? Or non-human animals in nature who have no rights to their own autonomy, in our civilization.
Well, I hope we get there.
Thank you. I
I
hope so
hope we
too.
get to that new
Yes.
system. And that means that we need to get through the next 4 years in the United States with this current administration. That means we need to get through or kind of keep surviving with what's going on with global warming. And it means that we need to survive the next catastrophe. You mentioned humans are so good in catastrophes, but you just put out an article in Common Dreams about avian flu. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Thank you. Yes, and that is being reprinted in Counterpunch this weekend
Sure.
too. So I'm glad for that. Yeah. So as you know, we appear to be on the brink of a new pandemic. This one around H5N1 or avian flu. And there are a variety of reasons for that, but essentially it's blowback from our exploitation of animals in the food industry. Most of the diseases that have ever affected our species, from smallpox and cholera to Ebola and even AIDS,
Mm.
one way or another derives from our our exploitation of animals for food and other purposes. So without going, into the history of it, essentially by keeping birds in confinement in Asia and elsewhere, we made it possible for this virus to spread, and now it's in migratory bird populations and it's spread throughout the world. And right now we're seeing the world's first panzootic. A panzootic means that this disease is now killing millions of animals all across the world. And
Mm.
it's scientists have never seen a virus do what this virus is doing, the way it has so quickly leapt from birds to mammals back again, and it's infecting and killing dolphins and manatees and penguins and herons, and of course now it's endemic in the agriculture system, which is the largest prison house in the world. You've got billions of animals languishing in horrible conditions. They, as you know, they were already being plied with antibiotics just to keep them alive long enough to get to the slaughterhouse. Um, and now with this crazy new administration, RFK Jr. wanting to just let the virus replicate,
What an idea.
yeah, just to let it burn itself out. I mean, it's such insanity, and it's so you have a kind of perfect storm where due to neoliberal austerity measures over the decades, you've had a rolling back and evisceration of public health measures and public health surveillance. And now the administration is further destroying our ability to respond effectively to a new pandemic, right? And it's not going to be like, if we do get this, it is not going to be like COVID. Okay, the death rate from COVID was maybe 1%.
Mhm.
In historically, H5N1, epidemiologists, virologists are not sure what the death rate is. The reported death rate, which may overstate the lethality, just to be clear, but the reported death rate has been over 50%. And it doesn't just attack old people. My son and his friends used to joke that COVID was the boomer remover. It only attacked us old people, so the young people were not, yeah, they've never been that concerned about COVID, but this would
Yeah.
kill everybody. I mean, babies. And so, yes. So I wrote this article about how the only thing that people talk about avian flu is egg prices.
Right.
I mean, it's this bizarre,
We are a sick society.
it's there's
Okay.
no compassion for the chickens, right, who are getting this horrible disease and dying in agony. There's no sense that maybe to minimize threats to human health, because three-quarters of all emerging diseases are zoonotic. That's to say, most of the things that are coming our way are because of our contact with other animals, mostly through the meat industry and destruction of habitat. No reflection about maybe there's another way out. Or maybe,
Yeah.
maybe we can just stop doing this.
Yeah. No, I've responded to some people's comments on social media about the price of eggs, and they're just hoping they wipe out the current chickens and bring them back and everything will be fine. And then I share with them what's going on to the chickens. Don't they care? And the response is, "Oh yeah, that's sad, but I like my eggs." You there's no argument there. You don't care.
And it's, yes, and it's now endemic in the dairy industry, cattle industry. It's now in sheep. It's in pigs.
It's incredible how many animals have been impacted and how it hasn't gotten us really badly yet. I'm surprised it's taken this long.
Well, this is a question that epidemiologists have been following and debating amongst themselves for months. They don't understand it either. There's various theories. But because of human exceptionalism, we think that we're just not like other animals, right? I mean, if I talk to my students, people say, well, there are humans, then there are animals. Well, no, it's not that we're like other animals. We actually are animals. We actually are mammals. There's no difference between us physiologically, morphologically, neurologically than any other being. And so, I mean, no qualitative distinction. So it's a matter of time. So here's what's happening is we're playing Russian roulette. Okay, as every hour, every day that this virus is allowed to replicate in the animal agriculture system, it's like churning. It's like spinning a revolver with like a million cylinders, and there's one bullet in the chamber. Well, you're going to have to roll that thing a lot before you get to the bullet, but you'll get to the bullet eventually. And if you're infecting millions and millions of animals and letting it spread, which is what we're doing, it's a matter of time before it finds a way to attach itself to our respiratory system and become transmissible between humans. And that's the one thing that hasn't happened yet. Okay. Humans have been getting sick from this, dairy workers and so forth.
Yeah.
The cases have been thankfully mild. No one really exactly sure why they've been mild, but there's no guarantee that it's going to continue that way. And I'll tell you this, Caryn, if we do get this, and it is as serious as some virologists think, we can't even begin to imagine the social collapse that could come with that. I mean, we're talking about an already a fascist kind of administration that would almost certainly impose martial law, or who knows
Yeah.
what they would do. And their uh, critics have called this administration the anti create. Sorry, critics have said that Trump administration is essentially creating an antisocial state. If you think about what the state is for, the government, right? It's there. This is an old thing going back to Thomas Hobbes in the 17th century. The state is there to protect the citizenry in a certain sense. Like why,
Hmm.
otherwise, why do you have a government? It's supposed to make sure, that capitalism is regulated but the Trump people are endangering all of us through their actions in a variety of ways. And if this virus takes hold, there will be almost no federal response, almost certainly, or it'll be a completely disorganized thing, and people will
Hmm.
die in their homes alone. I mean, and we'll be left to our own devices. So,
Okay, a few things.
yeah,
One is from a health point of view. If we're wondering what we can do, we learned through COVID that those who were eating a whole food plant diet did have less risk and fewer symptoms. So
is
by
that
eat,
true? I didn't know. I've not
yes,
read that.
yes. The Lancet had articles, there have been numerous articles that have
Interesting.
come out. That
Yeah,
doesn't mean that we're immune,
right.
but the risks are minimized, just like with all the other chronic diseases. And then also, if you're a mouth breather, beware, because nose breathing encourages nitric oxide, which helps also minimize these viral risks.
Interesting.
So we want to breathe more with our nose and less
Interesting.
with our
Yeah.
mouth.
Hmm.
Okay. Just little tips I like. I read about all
Sure.
this stuff all the time. I also wanted to mention just when you started talking about zoonotic diseases, I just realized that we are celebrating the 16th anniversary of this podcast. It's all about food. Totally forgot about it. Here we
Congratulations.
are, the end of March. And that's when this podcast started in 2009, making it the 16th anniversary. So, wait a minute. I'm popping the cork
Hey,
to
well,
our imaginary bottle of alcohol-free champagne. And there we go. But yeah, that was the
congratulations.
first subject that I talked about on this podcast 16 years ago was zoonotic diseases.
No kidding. Yeah.
And
Well,
here we
you may remember 16 years ago that not too much earlier, I mean, this is back in the 80s, Laurie Garrett, an NPR reporter, wrote a book called The Coming Plague.
go. Mm,
And she didn't actually talk about the zoonotic stuff as much as she might have, but scientists have been very concerned about this, as you know, for a very long time. And even if we get really lucky and we don't get H5N1,
yeah.
we're going to get something else, and it may
Yeah.
be even worse. So this is another incentive for us to do what your show tells us we need to do, which is to move away from the animal economy immediately.
Okay, so now we're going to spin this and bring out the bright side of things, if that's possible. I know with myself as an artist, I'm a performer, a singer, art is important to me for my own survival, and you are a magician.
Yes.
Is that one of the things you do for fun?
When COVID hit, I had a bunch of gigs lined up and I had to cancel them. And eventually I got some relief a couple years later from the Massachusetts Council for the Arts. They were giving uh, grants for people impacted by COVID.
Mhm.
So I had it was a part-time business because I'm a full-time professor. So I perform magic because I enjoy it mostly. And I discovered it, I came to it late in life. And it really is fascinating. I mean, who wouldn't want to be able to make things appear and disappear or create illusions or to read other people's minds? And of course, these are, it is theater. It's a form of performance,
Mhm.
but the illusion is so perfect and so uh, seamless that it creates a powerful, powerful experience in an audience when it's done well. And magicians became magicians, and we become magicians because we feel so much wonder and delight at seeing magic performed. And so it's even more enjoy. Well, it's a different kind of enjoyment when you're doing it because you know how it's done, but there's still a sense of wonder in the performance. So
Yeah, you can bring out all those lovely childlike qualities in adults, especially.
exactly, because we're all socialized to accept science as a kind of God. Um, and science can do wonderful things as well as not so wonderful things. Uh, but it also leaves us kind of jaded, right? We think everything has an explanation, um, and we've lost that wonder, that childlike wonder, or a sense that nature itself has a kind of enchantment, right? And I think, they look at the popularity of the Harry Potter or
Hmm.
Tolkien, Ursula K. Le Guin. I was just rereading A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin, fabulous novel about a magician, a sorcerer. Um, we need these. I think we really need and crave, right? As we get older, still we crave that childlike wonder and awe that we lose, that's drilled out of us over and over again, right? And what a magician does is he or she puts themselves in the position of the audience, right? And thinks of, well, what is the audience going to think? Suppose the audience thinks, oh, he just put it up his sleeve, or he did this or that. So what the magician does is close off every possible explanation. So if I think the audience will even think I have something up my sleeve, then I'll show there's nothing up my sleeve. So that then when this miracle occurs and there's no explanation, no rational explanation for it, you're just kind of astonished and you get that feeling of the sublime, right, that we don't often get. Now, as a performer and artist yourself, you know that art, it creates this wonderful little moment of transcendence. It takes us outside, the ordinary and um, the realm of cynicism and despair and connects us right to ourselves and to one
Yeah.
another. Yeah. So,
I also think with all the technology we have today, we're talking on Zoom right now,
yeah,
which not too long ago would have seemed like magic.
that's right.
There's so much that we have today that a few decades ago, or maybe 100 years ago, people would, if you talked about it, that would be magic. And so, what you do and what magicians do and artists is imagine what could be possible, and then enables us perhaps to achieve some of those things.
Well, it was Arthur C. Clarke who said that any technology sufficiently advanced would be indistinguishable from magic. But I'm not convinced of that definition because of course technology has so many problems that come with it
Okay,
too.
that's true.
And you know what I'm saying? Of course you're right, but then most of us hate being on Zoom. It's not like going to a magic performance and wanting to experience wonder. It's funny. It's so easy, right, for us to take it all for granted. We turn on the
Hmm.
TV, which should be a miraculous thing, and
Yeah.
we're bored, right? 800 channels and nothing on.
Yep. We are bored.
Bored in general, yes.
Well, that's, bringing back the conversation about violence.
Yes.
I wonder if some of that has to do with our boredom, sadly.
Yeah.
You know, how do we get that?
I was just last night. I showed my students in my film class a film from the 1980s called My Dinner with Andre.
Oh, one of my favorites.
Yeah, I thought it might be, Karen. 1981, and if your listeners haven't heard it, I highly recommend it. But
Yeah.
there is a discussion that comes up about that, about boredom and why our minds spin out into, elaborate fantasies or spectacles and of the grotesque. And I think I'm not saying there's nothing to that, but I also think that we live in a society that brutalizes us and that makes us feel alienated from nature, from ourselves, from one another, and that we can mistake that kind of melancholy and disconnection for boredom. I'm not saying
Mhm.
boredom isn't a thing, but I think it's also like if you go to the movies, as I sometimes do, and you watch the trailers for the coming movies, I feel like I've been hit over the head with a sledgehammer because you have all these Marvel movies and superhero movies and so forth, where they're just the sound is more and more amplified. So, and it's, the subwoofers, and you just feel like you're being shocked with the tidal wave of sensory stimulation. And the violence has to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So it isn't just that one person's life is at stake. It's a whole city that may be destroyed. And
Mhm.
that's not enough. Then it's the earth that's going to be destroyed. And oh, no, no, that's not enough. Then the whole universe is in danger of being destroyed, and it's this one bad guy, and they have to kill this one bad and I'm just so tired of seeing movie after movie that where guns and gunplay is this it's like a central aesthetic that completely lies to the public about the harm that guns
Hmm.
cause and the violence that that causes. And so there is this, I mean, in psychological terms, it is a form of sublimated aggression, right? We're feeling thwarted. I think many people in their basic life needs, their needs to feel loved and connected to others and to live in a society where it's based on decency and so we have this aggression. Where do we put it? And so we get fed these commodities and of spectacle and violence, and we ourselves then crave those same things. Like I think many young people don't know that there are movies like My Dinner with Andre. At least in my
Mhm.
experience, they've never heard of a movie like The Bicycle Thieves, which is the signal film of the Italian neo-realist
Oh,
movement.
sure. Another great film.
Yeah. And I think we're more or less I don't know how old you are, but I suspect, we have more in common age-wise than I do.
I'm going to be 67 very
Okay, well,
soon.
we're the same generation. And we grew up at a time when there was really great cinema, great American
Hmm.
cinema. I mean that the stuff that was coming out of Hollywood wasn't all just
Algorithm based.
algorithm based exactly. I could name many films. So so with aesthetic impoverishment, there's spiritual impoverishment, right? And uh so if young people today they're not reading Tolstoy and Dostoevsky as I was as a teenager, instead they're playing first person shooter games like Call of Duty or whatever. That's a brutalization, of the human character. And then that brutalization is paralleled with our foreign policies of mass violence abroad and so forth. So they're just these big social problems. And
Uh,
it's not
yeah,
just boredom.
you talk about films that people aren't familiar with, and I'm thinking about books and many things
Yes.
that people aren't familiar with. So you had recommended that I read this article in The Atlantic, American is Done Pretending About Me. We talked about it at the beginning of the podcast. I don't know if you noticed, I just wrote to the author.
Oh, good.
um, because the last paragraph annoyed me. I don't know if you remember it, but the
Yes.
last paragraph was perhaps the decline of plant-based eating was inevitable. Awareness of meat eating's many consequences first entered the public consciousness in the late 2000s after the release of documentaries such as Food Inc. and books such as The Omnivore's Dilemma. And I wrote to her and I said, I don't agree with you. What about John Robbins' Diet for New America in 1987? For me, that was groundbreaking at its time. There were other books that came before him, but it just shows you, someone in their own little framework, they don't know what came before them.
Well, I think it must be a young author who wrote that. And I think this is, again, it's an artifact of capitalism to foreshorten temporality or time and to make us amnesiac. So, in fact, before John Robbins, and John Robbins' book, for all its virtues, was not as widely read as all that. It was actually Francis Moore Lepay's
Oh,
book,
sure. Francis Moore
right?
Lepage. I could
Right.
have mentioned that. I might have to
Yes.
follow up.
And
Yeah.
Frances and I are appearing, she's generously agreed to be in conversation with me at the Harvard Bookstore on June
Hmm.
26th in Cambridge. And her book, Diet for a Small Planet, came out in 1971 and sold over 2 million copies,
Yeah.
2.5 million copies. And the argument of the book was that there should be universal vegetarianism as a way of mitigating, the ecological destruction and food insecurity. So there's there's this constant forgetting of what has come before. Not to mention, Upton Sinclair's The Jungle in the early
Yes, I
20th
thought about that too.
century,
But that
right?
didn't, unfortunately, that didn't impact people enough about meat eating per se. It
Yes.
just
No, that
made them
is,
want to get cleaner meat somehow.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
that is
But
absolutely,
yeah,
you
all
know.
good stuff.
So, I felt that that author in the Atlantic piece, I've not written them yet, but I'm going to, is it was really terrible because it struck this kind of glib, cynical position that, oh, well, yes, I understand that there are ethical problems, but I'm going to continue my behavior. And one of the things I really try to emphasize in my book is that the question of what we do to animals and raising them, killing them, eating them, is not some little trivial thing. It's like the most important issue of our time, and it's as radically evil as anything else that humans have ever done to one another. People just don't understand that because they don't want to understand that. It's not like forgetting to take out the recycling or something like that. It's like genocide. It's like slavery. It
Yeah,
really
right.
truly is. Um, and I don't know how to get, Karen, I don't know how to get that message through to people because there's so many psychological defenses against acknowledging the true extremity of the harm that we're committing. But we have to call it for what it is and not try to be, not be equivocal or mamby-pamby about it.
John, I really appreciate your truth and all that you've said and written. And I want to continue this conversation. So, in a few more months, when your book, The Omnivore's Deception, What We Get Wrong About Meat, Animals, and Ourselves, is coming out, we're going to pick this conversation up again. I got to read the book first.
Ha ha ha. Well, I'm delighted to meet you finally and to have this
Yeah.
conversation. So looking forward to the next one.
Okay. Thank you. So, thank you for joining me today on It's All About Food, and we'll resume this soon. Everybody, have a delicious week.